The US government used the CIA, actually it was called the CIAA, the Central Intelligence Agency Arts, to establish modern art throughout the country and throughout the world as American propaganda, and taxpayers footed the bill. Uncle Sam put his foot on the scale to denigrate realistic fine art. What kind of bizarre and twisted use of government power was this? In 1939, the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, celebrated the opening of their new museum. And no less than the President of the United States himself, Franklin D. Roosevelt, spoke at the opening. There and then, he consecrated modern experimental and abstract art as uniquely American, as it demonstrated that in America, you were free to do anything. He didn't address the question of whether literally anything was worth doing. It is, in fact, the only time in American history that a sitting president spoke at the opening of an art museum, giving it his blessing and presidential prestige and power. This occurred the same year World War II began, after Stalin and Hitler agreed to divide Poland between them. The Nazis and the communists at the time were brutally and oppressively controlling the accepted subject matter of literature, education, culture, and art, and those who defied them were imprisoned, tortured, and slaughtered. The Nazis only wanted classical heroic art demonstrating the image of their superior Aryan Superman race. And the communists only permitted social realist art that was anti-capitalist and glorified the proletarian workers. While it would have been perfectly possible to show that Americans were free to choose any subject matter, regardless of whether it was for or against any political or economic agenda, or engage subjects that had nothing to do with any specific worldview, instead, the US government chose to back deconstructive abstract art as representing our freedom. And to that end, 1,000 emissaries were sent throughout America and the world by the US government and the CIA, proselytizing for modern and abstract art. The irony is that this actually suppressed the creativity of the skilled and well-trained representational artists of the time. Rather than giving them freedom, it imposed artistic controls by the government, basically ostracizing narrative artists who use their knowledge and skills to paint scenes about life in the real world. Professor Michael Pierce lays much of this out in his recent, well-documented book titled Kitsch, Propaganda, and the American Avant-Garde, which shows how the Roosevelt administration used modern and abstract art as organized propaganda paid for by we taxpayers. This quote from Pierce's book, "This wasn't just a museum opening. It was a declaration of US art policy, a wedding ceremony binding the individualist avant-garde to the state as American art, which would be delivered to the audience of the world through extensive propaganda campaigns." More than anything else, this explains why representational fine art has for the most of the past 100 years been overshadowed by modernism, product that has been celebrated for trashing and degrading all of the elements that have defined fine art for thousands of years. They have called this creativity. Mankind has always considered actual creativity and progress as generating order out of chaos. In the book of Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth and the natural order of the universe, separating light from darkness. God gave mankind domain over the earth, and Adam and Eve were given the job of naming all the plants and animals. Whether you believe it literally or symbolically, humanity's God-given responsibility was to reign in the chaos and bring order to the world. And he saw that it was good. But in 1939, the government considered it progress to turn human nature on its head and support art that championed making chaos out of order. It would have been no different than if the government had backed atonal music or just cacophonous noise as proof of American freedom, and denigrated performances of Chopin, Beethoven, and Tchaikovsky, or if they'd replaced great poetry with incoherent vocal sounds, or if they replaced the ballet with people doing unchoreographed, random, awkward movements. In fact, the use of the term abstract is a complete misnomer. Abstract works are not actually abstract. The term abstract means when one thing represents something else. A blueprint, for example, is an abstract of a building, or a floor plan, or electrical circuitry. An abstract of a patent application is a summary of the invention with illustrative images and a description of what it does. In other words, an abstract is when one thing represents something else. What does a de Kooning, a Miro, or a Jackson Pollock represent? Perhaps at most we could say chaos or entropy. Or are they really just drips and smudges or smears and splatters of color on a flat surface? That's the so-called truth about art that Clement Greenberg or Hilton Kramer claimed that they were capturing. Meaning was supposed to be left to the viewer for individual interpretation. But in fact, all of the efforts of humanity work in the opposite direction. We bring order out of chaos. We work against entropy. We build homes, cars, and roads and computers, skyscrapers, airplanes, rocket ships, generators that power electric lights and an endless array of appliances and machinery. We built the pyramids, the Suez Canal, and the Great Wall of China. We invented antibiotics, CAT scans, open heart surgery, and have doubled the average lifespan. We invented agriculture, speech, theater, television, movies, and the internet. And culturally, we invented literature, poetry, music, dance, and fine art. To communicate all human experience, to express beauty and truth, and to imbue life with purpose and meaning. I therefore tell you that abstract art is not actually abstract. They've stolen its meaning. But if it's not abstract, what is it? And the one word, the one idea, the one concept that pulls it all together is the word concrete. Abstract art is actually concrete. It's concrete dabs and streaks and splashes and blobs and smears of paint on a canvas, and everything about it shouts, "Look at me, I'm telling you the truth. Painting is nothing but a flat design of colors and shapes." It's concrete. So is this really the truth of what fine art is? That makes as much sense as saying Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, Dickens, and Robert Frost were all really liars. Because after all, writing is nothing but shapes and black squiggles on white paper. The meaning in their words, the beauty in their form, and the ideas and concepts expressed don't matter. It's those black squiggles on paper that are the truth of writing. How many books do you think would be sold where every page was filled with black squiggles? This analogy is actually quite exact and unmasks the truth behind abstract and most modern art. We humans, we see the world in 3 dimensions. The potential that exists in pencil, charcoal, and paint as mediums only have that potential actualized when it successfully creates 3-dimensional illusions, which exponentially increases the power of subject matter, since 3 dimensions is actually how we see the real world. Fine art, just like spoken and written language, evolved primarily as a form of communication, and the more successfully any form of communication describes and replicates human experience, the more meaningful and compelling it is to people who share it. And communication only takes place when the listener and the speaker, the writer and the reader, and the artist and the viewer share a common language. But with speaking, writing, and reading, there are hundreds of languages, and without translators, communication cannot take place. Therefore, realist fine art is the one universal language which can be understood by all people of all time regardless of which language they speak and write. The definition of literature is the body of written works that have artistic, intellectual, or lasting cultural value. It includes creative writing such as novels, poems, plays, and short stories, as well as other forms of written expression that explore human experience, human ideas, and human emotions. Doesn't this correlate directly with what the definition of fine art is as well? What does a Botticelli, a Bouguereau, a Goya, a Vermeer, a Waterhouse, a Rembrandt, or a Caravaggio represent? Different aspects of that shared human experience. The human condition itself is the essential subject of all great literature, poetry, fine art, and theater. The loves, the dreams, the hopes, fears, and suffering of humanity, heaven's highest virtues, or the seven circles of hell, whether our subjects are poverty and war, or the lives of ordinary or extraordinary people, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, miracles, or salvation itself. Their works are true abstractions of our shared humanity. All meaning in life comes from making order out of chaos. Modern art reverts back to the chaos and endlessly celebrates it as some form of genius. A great Da Vinci, a Rembrandt, or a Bouguereau took weeks or months. A Vermeer, a Lord Leighton, or an Alma Tadema demanded planning, sacrifice, discipline, and creative genius. Great works of art are rare. They cannot be mass-produced. But a canvas of streaks and splashes and smudges, that can be made in hours, even in minutes. If critics declare a genius and museums hang them with reverence, then galleries can sell them at staggering prices, and there is no end of supply. Every hour another canvas, every day another masterpiece. Now I need to stop here for a second and make one thing very clear. Our rights and freedoms are more important than even great fine art. So if people wish to splatter paint on a canvas and call it great art, and others want to purchase it, regardless of price, they are free to do so in this country, and it's as it should be. We are also free to call them out, just the way we see it. I would never want to ban modern art the way most university art departments and museums banned contemporary realism from World War II until about 20 years ago, when representational art has been steadily reemerging. By elevating the quick and easily mass-produced above time-consuming and masterful work, they created a financial machine, an endless conveyor belt of product dressed up as being profound and sold at ever more preposterous prices. Bouguereau was incredibly productive during his life, painting roughly 838 finished works. Alma Tadema, a little over 400. Do you know how many Picassos there are? Well over 50,000, with a combined value at current prices of over $120 billion, which is roughly equal to the value of General Motors and Ford Motor Company combined. Interestingly, Bouguereau, Jerome, and Lord Leighton paintings are as undervalued today as Rembrandt's and Caravaggio's were in the late 1800s, when they sold for far less than the works of Joshua Reynolds, George Romney, or Thomas Lawrence, famous English portraitists. From the very first handmade drawings on cave walls, humanity sought to communicate across time. Those markings were not primarily decoration. They were language. They said, we were here. This is what we saw. This is what mattered to us. Before the printing press, before even alphabets, there was art. And the attempt to represent the world and human experience has always been its clear intent. You artists here today, you are their heirs, their legacy. When you paint the sorrow of a mother, the innocence of a child, the strength of a worker, or the pain and terror of a slave, you speak a truth that crosses centuries and continents and all of human history. And that is why realism is not easy. It's not parochial. Its best examples are profound, compelling, and universal. It is our shared inheritance. When you, as realist artists, use paint to conjure a child's face or the movement of a dancer or the sorrow of a widow, you are transforming substances into something that represents the real world on multiple levels: the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual. You are performing the true act of abstraction. Realism is the highest form of abstraction because it uses materials and different mediums and brings them to life with order, spirit, soul, and purpose. And the US government used the CIA, actually it was called the CIAA, the Central Intelligence Agency Arts, to establish modern art throughout the country and throughout the world as American propaganda, and taxpayers footed the bill. Uncle Sam put his foot on the scale to denigrate realistic fine art. What kind of bizarre and twisted use of government power was this? But here is the miracle. You are all here. You have not forgotten what art is supposed to be. You've chosen the harder path, the path of skill, discipline, and beauty. Your work cannot be mass-produced. It cannot be replaced tomorrow by another pail of thrown paint. It takes time, patience, commitment, and love. And that is why it has meaning. And what you create matters. When people stand before your work, they feel that universal language once again. They remember that art is not just decoration, or worse, just a financial investment. It's not bitcoins. It's communication of life, imagination, ideation, and experience. The second miracle is that since the founding of the Art Renewal Center, skilled and highly trained artwork has exploded exponentially. From a tiny handful of schools, only 14 in 2001, with less than 200 total students. Today there are 100 ARC-approved art ateliers, academies, and programs, as well as scores of additional schools that are incorporating skill-based lessons into their curriculum, all teaching thousands of students each and every year. From a mere handful of perhaps 50 well-trained artists at the end of the 20th century, there are tens of thousands of artists who have mastered the craft needed to bring their subjects and ideas to fruition with poetry, with beauty and grace. The 21st century representational art movement is occurring worldwide, as this exhibition clearly demonstrates. And there are hundreds of dealers representing the best of these artists who are once again making their life's dream also their life's work. Furthermore, I very recently learned about the new George Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, which is due to open in California later this year. I don't know if you're aware of it. In their opening exhibition, they will be exhibiting works by Julie Bell and her husband Boris Viellos. Julie, I might add, has won more awards in past ARC competitions and salons than any other artist, and she has been asked to sit on the 9-person board of advisors of this new Lucas Museum that apparently costs over $1 billion to build. And it looks a lot like a spaceship. We'll find pictures of it online. Who can doubt the renewal and revitalization of humanist narrative fine art is well on its way? Purchasing works by the best living artists today will be like buying the Impressionists when they were first creating their works. Let us all show in our work what we value as artists and as human beings, just as the great masters of the past showed it in theirs, that images of life and humanity are what have the highest value. And let us continue step by step to reconstruct what is ordered, what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. For that is not only the artists, writers, and musicians' task, it is humanity's calling. So defend beauty, use your skills without apology. Know that you stand in the lineage of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and 1,000 generations who worked to create the most advanced, successful civilization that has ever existed. You are speaking in that universal language of humanity, and you are the saviors of one of civilization's greatest achievements, the fine arts of painting, drawing, and sculpture. You all deserve consummate congratulations. Continue to express the story of humanity and do it with love, seeking truth and beauty, and with a passion driven by deep purpose and profound meaning. Thank you.